There are some verses in the Bible that are so famous, so powerful, you feel like you've heard them a million times. But what if we've been missing a huge part of the story in one of the most famous ones? That's what we're going to dig into today.
Okay, here it is. Wow. I mean, that is a powerful image, isn't it? You can just picture it. Every single knee bowing, every tongue confessing. It sounds, it sounds absolute, final. The real question, though, isn't if it's going to happen. The text is pretty clear on that. The real question is how. So the way many of us have been taught to see this is that this is the ultimate moment of judgment. God's enemies, everyone who resisted, finally defeated. They're forced to their knees, gritting their teeth, having to admit that he was right all along. It's this picture of a forced, shameful, and reluctant submission. But what if that's not what's happening here at all? What if this isn't about forced submission? What if it's actually about something far more beautiful? Could this final bow actually be an act of universal, willing, and even joyful celebration? That's the idea we're going to explore. All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we have to do something that might sound a little academic, but stick with me, because this is where it gets really good. We need to look at one key word in the original Greek. And trust me, this one word, it changes everything. Okay, so the word for acknowledge or confess here is exomologeo. Now, this is so important. The Apostle Paul had other words he could have used, words that just mean to admit a fact, kind of like a suspect finally confessing to a crime. But he didn't use those. He chose this word. And exomologeo is packed with joy. It means to openly profess, to praise, to give thanks. It's not the gritted teeth confession of a defeated enemy. It's the joyful shout of someone celebrating a victory. And this really gets to the core of it, doesn't it? I mean, think about the character of God. Does a God of love really find glory in hypocritical praise that's forced out of people? It would be a travesty. Or is true glory found in genuine, heartfelt worship that comes from a place of love? Paul's choice of words here points directly to that second option. And let's not forget the context of the whole chapter. The verses leading right up to this are this beautiful hymn about the humility of Christ, how he emptied himself and became a servant. So does it really track that this incredible picture of humility would suddenly slam into this image of a cosmic tyrant forcing everyone to bow? It just feels jarring. It doesn't fit the theme at all. Okay, now here's maybe the biggest clue of all, and it comes from Paul himself. In another letter, 1 Corinthians, he makes this incredibly clear statement. He says, "No one can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit." So let's just put those two pieces together. On one hand, Philippians says, every tongue will confess Jesus is Lord. On the other hand, Paul says that specific confession is only possible through the Holy Spirit. Well, the Holy Spirit doesn't force people to do things against their will. That confession is a genuine act of faith. So, if everyone is making it, it has to be a willing, genuine act of worship. That's the language of salvation, not damnation. Now, this isn't just Paul coming up with a new idea out of the blue. He's actually plugging into a huge, ancient promise from the scriptures. He's reaching all the way back to the Old Testament prophets. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger biblical picture. Get this. That line, every knee will bow, that's a direct quote from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 45. In Isaiah, God himself makes this oath, this promise, that one day the entire world will willingly turn to him. Paul is picking up that ancient promise and saying, hey everyone, this is it. This is how it gets fulfilled, through Jesus. But what's really cool is that Paul actually expands on Isaiah's vision. He makes it cosmically huge. He doesn't just say everyone, he spells it out. In heaven, and on earth, and under the earth. He's making it crystal clear that this is an all-encompassing event. Absolutely no one, not even the dead, is left out. And if you had any doubt about how Paul understands this verse, he quotes Isaiah again in his letter to the Romans. And this time he makes a fascinating little change. The original in Isaiah says, every tongue will swear. But when Paul quotes it in Romans, he writes, every tongue will give praise to God. He is explicitly interpreting that Old Testament promise as an act of joyful worship. It couldn't be clearer. So you see the pattern emerging, right? This isn't some isolated verse he just threw in there. This idea is the grand finale, the climax of Paul's entire theology. It's the destination that God's whole plan for creation has been heading towards all along. I mean, just look at the language he uses all over his letters. In Romans, he talks about God's plan to be merciful to all. In Colossians, he says the goal is to reconcile to himself all things. In Ephesians, it's to gather up all things in him. See, it's this constant, powerful, beautiful drumbeat of ultimate, total reconciliation.
And all of this builds to what might be the most mind-blowing statement of all in 1 Corinthians 15. The end goal, the final state of the universe, is that God may be all in all. Think about that. Not just God overall, but God in all, filling every single being with his own life and presence.
Okay, so with all of that as our backdrop, the meaning of the Greek word, the context in Paul's letters, the Old Testament promise, let's go back and read that verse from Philippians one more time. Let's see how it sounds now. See? Suddenly, it's not a threat of judgment anymore. It becomes this incredible promise, a promise of a day when every single created being, everywhere, finally joins the celebration willingly and with joy. The entire scene just transforms. It's not a courtroom with bitter, defeated enemies being sentenced. It's a cosmic choir. It's a family reunion where every voice finally joins the same song. The story shifts from being about a God who crushes his enemies to a God whose love is so powerful, it actually wins them over.
So this leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. What does God's ultimate victory really look like? Is it a victory of sheer power, forcing submission? Or is it a victory of relentless love, one that finally wins over every single heart? Because if every confession is a joyful one, it reveals a victory far greater and far more glorious than we might have ever imagined. It's definitely something to think about.